Halftime Howie here. You know, when I began this show in 2010, it wasn't my original idea to focus on the community. I had two inspirations way back to my WGBB days. One of them was Mike Halpern, who was right here in Long Beach on air, and the other one was my good friend Mike Rabb, who had Freeport on air. And I loved the concept of focusing on a community and talking about what goes on in the community. So I'm so pleased that one of my inspirations from my WGBB days, who did a fabulous job with Freeport on air, is Mike Rabb. And Mike, let's reminisce a little bit. Talk about your days at WGBB and talk about Freeport on air, because I loved it.
You know, Howie, it's really great. Thanks for having me on your show. This is quite nostalgic in fact. It's been a long time since we've in fact, it was interesting. I was mentioning to a friend of mine that I'm coming on your show, and I said, when I was on Freeport Live, I used to do the intro to you. And I pass on the microphone to your show, and it was always exciting that you had been dealing with the sports of high school students. And I remember you were the in-house person. Any high school student wanted to know about sports, they came to you. So, you know, WGBB has a lot of history when it came to talk radio. Kind of lost that a little bit over the years, but I think it's very important to reach back to community. I had the show about Freeport and all the different exciting things that are taking place within its community. And here you're doing a fantastic job bringing the topics of Long Beach to the residents.
Absolutely, Mike. And one of my inspirations here in Long Beach was another old friend from WGBB who I still to this day can't imagine how he did what he did. That's James Hodge, who runs the MLK Community Center. 6 days a week, he hosted a gospel show on air from midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 days a week, and called himself back then the Boy Wonder, and now he's doing great things for the community here in Long Beach.
Now, I'll go back to nostalgia when it comes to Mr. Hodge. I remember him coming in with those boxes and boxes of albums and putting on whatever music he was going to be putting on for that day. And I was always so impressed that he was able to keep them all organized and know how to pull one versus the other, whereas today production is just pushing a button and loading the next song on. So, he was great. In fact, and there was times where I actually stayed a little later just to listen to him. He was great, very inspirational.
Yeah, he was great, and now to see what he's doing, and now let's segue into what I really invited is that, what James was so special about is that after Hurricane Sandy, he did yeoman's work helping out families who needed work. He didn't sleep for days, and Mike, I know that this is your life's passion and work. So talk about what Michael Rabb is up to these days, especially concerning Hurricane Sandy and storm recovery. Because I think that's something you're involved with.
Oh, Sandy. I will never name a dog Sandy. I'll never name a child Sandy. I'll never name a music song Sandy. Sandy to me has been a very huge challenge, not only to myself, but obviously to all of Long Island and all our community. It all began with me living in Freeport for well over 25 years. And somebody gave a call one day and said, there's going to be a storm, be prepared. In my case, I have the very good fortune of working for Nassau County's County Executive Ed Mangano, and my position at the time was working in the Nassau County Office of Housing, where I was assisting with homeless and housing challenges. And a couple of weeks before Hurricane Sandy, I get an email to attend the Nassau County training for the American Red Cross to become a shelter manager. So I went through the shelter manager training with a group of my colleagues. And the night of the hurricane, so be it, I show up at the Nassau Community College shelter and lived there for 10 days, cooperated and participated as one of the shelter managers. We hosted over 1,200 families for several days, as you can imagine that experience. Coming home to my house in Freeport that endured over 6 feet of water and wave action that knocked my house over basically off its foundation. It resulted in me being homeless. And at the time, I said this is something that has been unprecedented, as you can imagine, here on Long Island. I mean, Howie, when you really stop and think about it, ourselves, our parents, and even some of our grandparents never experienced this type of devastation. It's really become a learning curve throughout the state. And at that point, I had the opportunity to meet up with the county executive, and I asked him if I could be a special storm recovery liaison for the county for Hurricane Sandy. And for the last a little over 3 years, I've been dealing, I think my count is now, I've exceeded over 3,800 families that I've spoken to or involved with, whether through email or calls. It has been a devastation of unknown proportion, and it's continuing, Howie.
Michael, talk about why it's taken years for so many families on especially the South Shore of Long Island to get back in their homes, and all the problems they've faced with New York Rising and FEMA. Why has it taken years, Michael?
Oh man, give me years and I'll be able to give you the answer to that. To begin with, once again, I come back to the fact that this is a first-time experience. We have never, ever had this type of devastation. You could go back to Irene, which was a hurricane a year before. Did it damage some homes? Yes, but nowhere near to the devastation. Going back 20, 30 years, we never had this type of a tidal surge within our recent generations. So therefore, planning didn't have this within their vision to this extent. The people who were called to duty were ready. They have the heart and they had the soul, but they also, no one of us had the experience. So it became a learning curve, not only during the, before and during the disaster, but post-disaster. We were looking at each other, how can we move forward? Well, right after the hurricane, there was no New York Rising. All there was if you had flood insurance. And if you had flood insurance, how much was your coverage? And if you had flood insurance, what about structure? Well, did you also have contents insurance? Well, some people thought flood insurance means everything, and flood insurance only meant contents. Only meant structure. So now you think you're paying for flood insurance, and all of a sudden the flood comes, and now you have absolutely no personal items left because they weren't covered in the insurance. So that becomes the first the first wave of the disaster. Then comes if you weren't insured. What are you going to do? Are you going to take your children's college education? Are you going to take your retirement fund? Are you going to sell your home and start with an apartment again because you are devastated? Do you then deal with contractors? What about the contractors that take deposits and they walk away? What about the contractors that do most of the work and leave stuff unfinished? Insurance companies, whether they pay the full benefit, or did they have unscrupulous inspectors who came and gave fraudulent reports, as you could see that happen within the National Flood Insurance Program. So we began with a vacuum of nothing but the problems of challenge of either having or not having flood insurance. Then came the federal program through HUD, where the federal government funded New York State. New York State then came out with the New York Rising program. And by the way, the New York Rising program is not all of New York State. It is all of New York State less the city of New York. The city of New York has its own program called Build It Back. But be that as it may, New York Rising did come out several months after the storm, and they did a recruitment campaign in order to try to sign as many people up for New York Rising. And on April 17th, 2 years ago, they had a deadline. And they said on this day, after that date, no more people can sign up for New York Rising. And hundreds, Howie, thousands, I will say this, thousands of people missed that deadline. These are people, Howie, that were senior citizens. These are people that might have been illiterate. These are people with special needs, whether they be psychological or physical needs. These are people that might be expatriates, people that are working outside the country. They could be veterans that are in military service right now. There were people that just simply were not home to receive the mailings, to sign up for New York Rising. And then the very next day, people surfaced and said, what do I do now? And Howie, that's why we're here. We're here to talk to people. We're here to reach out, not only to the people who got the help, but also to the people that haven't found their way yet.
All right, that ends the first segment of Michael Rapp. The next segment will be about, God forbid, we get hit with another horrendous storm. Will Long Beach and the South Shore be ready to handle it? We'll find out from Michael Rapp in the next segment about, God forbid, will we be able to handle another horrendous storm.